Doing? Give us a little shout out. Say hi, say hello, say hola, say other things that make a lot of sense. Nice to see you all. We're at 198. We're at 200. All right. I know that a lot of you have been working very hard for our first 3 nights of our cram finale. We have 2 more nights to go. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on writing and thinking. That's a lot of what we'll be doing tonight. And tomorrow will be a little bit more fun, game-like content review. Just like usual, we have our team here. We're sitting on the screen right now. We're going to be in the chat helping you out and on screen helping you out as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Posa, who's going to dive deep into the SAQ.
That's right. So tonight we're going to do a lot of practice, and we hope that you guys will participate a lot, be able to put a lot of things in the chat, and as we give you some practice prompts. So our goal is that we went through all of the content, okay, let's say most of the content from units 1 through 9, did some DBQ practice last night, and then now we're going to look at the SAQ, the LEQ, and then some multiple choice questions. So first, I will toggle the captions. Before I forget to do that. And then we'll get started. We're going to start with the short answer question. Tonight, doing the SAQ, the LEQ, and stimulus-based multiple choice questions. And if you look in your packet, we put in the packet the actual prompts that we're going to be working on tonight so that you'll have the chance to write them and then also to go back and look at them. And these are all released questions so that way you can also have access to the rubrics. All right, as usual, follow at ThinkFiveable on social media. And let us know if any of you guys have won the $100 yet. You know, that's one of the social media challenges. We hope that our people who attend our cram would win some money from it, from your clever sharing on social media. So here is the team. We are on the skills night, and then tomorrow night's the grand finale, which we look forward to. As usual, keep track of, take notes, stay active, but also don't worry about trying to write everything down because there is a replay. You have all of the information available for you on CramHub. Tonight, at the end of the night, I'm going to be sharing the key for the units 1 through 9 follow-along questions. So you can go back and make sure that if you did miss content for a question, that you have access to that. And then, as always, make sure that you're using the chat in order to advance your historical knowledge, share information, and respond to the questions. Although it's nice to have a lot of interesting random comments, it's always good also to make sure that we're staying on topic. Use the Q&A tab if there's any specific questions. Be supportive, be patient, be kind. That's what we do here at Fiveable. We're all in this together. So let's get started. All right, our agenda is we're going to start off with a Unit 9 quiz, and then get into some short answer questions. So actually, we're starting off with a quiz break because we didn't get to the Unit 9 quiz last time. So that way you can hear that Fiveable music that I'm sure you've been missing, that you've been hearing in your brain every night as you go to sleep since this whole thing started. All right, so Deb, do you want to come on up and run the Unit 9 quiz?
Yeah, hey guys. I hope you're all excited and ready to be here today. I know that I am, and I'm going to start sharing our Unit 9 quiz. Oops. Okay. Unit 9 quiz. Here we go. I can copy and paste the link in the chat. Oops. Okay. Just put the link in now.
Deb, can you try sharing the screen again?
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah. Here.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Can we see it now? Are we good?
We're good.
Okay. Fabulous. All right. We got 94 of you. Let's get a few more people in. Good job. Coming in. 9 is globalization. This is what we focused on a lot yesterday with the Green Revolution and other lovely things that we did. I hope that after last week you guys are feeling way more confident on this question. Okay, let me go ahead and start with this. So question 1 is, what impact did the Green Revolution have on smaller, less commercialized farmers? Was it a negative impact because of the high cost of new fertilizers and pesticides? Was it a positive impact because of the increase of jobs? Positive impact because of the cheap cost of assembly line technology? Or a negative impact because of the introduction of crossbreeding? Okay guys, let's get those answers. And we did a ton on Green Revolution, so let's see what you guys remember. And let's see that answer. Amazing, you guys, 72%. That's super good. And it was a negative impact because of the high cost of new fertilizers and pesticides. So if you're a small farm, you're less commercialized, it's going to be harder to afford all those new technologies that are coming up. Okay, let's see the next question. This is, which new technology directly increased the production of material goods in the 1900s? Was it A, nuclear power, B, air travel, C, shipping containers, or D, cellular communication? These are all like new technologies popping up, and I'm sure that some of these you've had a bunch of like interaction with in your lives too, which is cool. Although some maybe not so much. One thing that I like about globalization is I feel like it like connects to our lives a lot. All right, let's see the answer. Okay, so this one is nuclear power. So think about it, it's the production of new material goods. So nuclear power was a way to power all those facilities that were making the goods. So some might still use electricity, some might use gas, and nuclear power was a new thing that was added. A lot of you guys said shipping containers. So think about like how it's produced, not something used in the production. All right, let's see that next question. So this is, which of the following is an example of a difficulty that prevents a country from vaccinating its people? Is the answer political unrest, war, religious values, which is D, be careful of that, or C, all of the above? I feel like most things have D as all above, so that tripped me up, so be careful of that. Let's see that answer in 3, 2, 1. Amazing job, you guys! All of the above are difficulties. 95%. I'm really proud of you guys. Okay, number 4. How do the top causes of death differ between low income and upper middle income countries? Is it A, upper middle income countries suffer from diseases related to childhood and infanthood? B, low-income countries suffer from diseases related to childbirth and infanthood. C, low-income countries suffer from diseases related to increased sanitation. Or D, upper middle-income countries suffer from diseases related to increased longevity. Make sure that you guys read super carefully here, because all the questions have like similar learning and like closely related words. So it's super, super important to pick out what words are the same and not the same. All right, I'm going to see the next question in 3, 2, 1. Okay, nice job, guys. So like I said, this one's really mostly about reading. So the upper middle income countries that have more money suffer from diseases related to increased longevity, which is basically people living longer. So if you're living longer, you're going to have more things like dementia, Alzheimer's, diseases like that, right? Okay, let's see the next one. So this is ASEAN and NAFTA are both examples of what type of entity? Is it A, multinational corporations, B, regional trade agreements, C, peace treaties, or D, military alliances? I know that NAFTA here is more familiar than ASEAN, so you might want to think about one to help you with the other. But I'm not going to give anything away. You guys got this. I'm going to show the next question in 3, 2, and 1. Nice job, guys. So they are regional trade agreements. You might remember NAFTA more for this, and it's an agreement between a bunch of different countries. All right, nice job. Let's see the next question. Which of the following economic agreements does not still exist today? The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, United Nations, League of Nations, or World Trade Organization? You guys got this. I love the music. Like, it's always getting stuck in my head. Alright, I'm going to show the answer in 3, 2, and 1. Good job, guys. That's a League of Nations. Okay. 7. In which country did the Green Belt movement occur? Was it South Africa, China, Kenya, or the United States? Consider what the Green Belt movement is. Nice. Alright, keep getting those answers in. I'm going to reveal the answer in 3, in 2, and in 1. Okay, so this one was in Kenya. And try and like think about the definition of it with it being like around that region of Africa, right? Alright, let's see the next question. Which of these challenged old assumptions about race, class, gender, and religion? Was it the World Health Organization, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the North American Free Trade Agreement, also known as NAFTA? You guys got this one? Let's see the answer in 3, in 2, and in 1. Amazing job, you guys. 94%. And yep, that's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And race, class, gender, religion, all like rights people have, right? Let's see that next question. And this one is which of the following is not a characteristic of the Harlem Renaissance? So, did it A, sought to rebel against traditional forms of music and writing? B, it sought to distance itself from the stereotypical portrayal of African American performance. C, it sought to evolve the current day positive perspectives of African American culture. Or D, it sought to respond against the mechanized and repetitive industrial society of the previous generation. You guys got this one. Let's get those answers in. Okay, nice. I'm going to show that answer in 3, in 2, and in 1. Okay, so the Harlem Renaissance. First off, this question is asking which is not a characteristic. So it's super duper important to pay attention to the wording. So it's the Harlem Renaissance was like this gathering in Harlem of all these like Black writers and like it was basically a cultural renaissance, right? So it sought to rebel against traditional forms, yep, because they were all creating new music, new writing. It sought to distance itself from stereotypical portrayal of African Americans, yep, because all people were trying to create their new their new materials, right? And their new portrayal. And D, it did sought to respond against the past, right? So basically what's that saying is they were creating a new name for themselves, a new label. And that's what they were doing. So the reason that it was not C, I don't like the wording of it that much because it is like, it's changing how they were seen, right? But I guess because it says positive perspectives, you want to focus on that because they were trying to enhance the positives. Like they didn't want to change that. Okay, next question. What is the relationship between the change in influence of the United States and the English language during the early 21st century? So 21st century is like the 2000s. So A, both US and the English language grew in influence. B, the US grew in influence, but the English language decayed in influence. C, both the US and the English language decayed in influence. And D, the English language grew in influence, but the US decayed. So make sure you're reading carefully because this is a lot of like the same words again. You don't want to get mixed up what they mean, even because they all sound kind of similar. Also, I'm so proud of you guys for how you're doing so far. I'm really, really impressed with all of the answer choices that you've shown. And some of these questions are like, this is so hard. So great job so far. I'm going to reveal that answer in 3, in 2, and in. Oops. Great job. See, 87%. Really, really nice job, you guys. And the US and the English language were both growing in influence as it became more of a superpower. All right, next question. Brexit, you know what that is, represented which of the following concerns about globalization? Was it undermining national sovereignty? B, working conditions? C, convoluted and wasteful supply chain? Or D, environmental damage? You guys got this one. Job. Keep those answers coming. Okay. Very nice. Okay, I'm going to show the answer in 3, 2, and in 1. Nice, you guys. You got 58%. That's a good majority. Brexit works to undermine national sovereignty because it was globalization. And they kind of wanted more of the United Nations to be like equal, right? Not one more so than another. All right, next question. Which of the following is an example of globalization that has directly benefited the environment? Was it the National Park Service, Great Barrier Reef, Costa Rica's ecotourism industry, or D, all of the above? I love questions that have to do with the environment so much. I love like nature and environment things, so like this stuff I really Alright, let's see the answer in 3, in 2, and in 1. Fabulous job, all the above. I think it wasn't A, National Park Service, because it's talking about globalization, which is like everything. Because National Park Service is just concentrated in the United States. All right, amazing job, you guys. Super, super proud. We're almost there. 3 more questions. We got this. Which country is not part of 5 countries on the Security Council of the United States? Is it A, China, B, Japan, C, Russia, or D, United States? I have no idea. Countries. This one. Okay. You guys got this one. Okay, keep getting those answers in, you guys. Alright, I'm gonna reveal in 3, in 2, and in 1. Nice job. So this one's Japan, and I mean, you kind of just have to memorize this one, but that's okay. You guys got this one for the next one now. Let's see that next question. How did women begin to challenge the existing social order at the end of the 20th century? So that's like 1900s, right? Okay. Was it A, holding political office, B, choosing whether or not to have children, C, entering careers that were traditionally reserved for men, or D, all of the above? You guys got this one. Those answers in. Okay. One more left after this. Already been 20 minutes. This is flying, guys. Alright, I'm going to reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. All the above. Amazing job. 96% of you got it. All of these holding political office, choosing whether or not to have children, entering careers, all of these are ways that women push the boundaries and challenge existing social order. All right, last question. We got this. Which of the following was a major goal of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Is it the protection of women's rights? The protection of refugees' rights? This is one of the other ones. So C is all of the above, not D. So you should note that. Or D, protection of children's rights. Whose rights were they protected? I'm going to show the answer in 3, in 2, and in 1. Amazing job, you guys. Everybody's rights. Universal Declaration, everyone deserves rights. I am so proud of you for how well you did on this quiz. You're going to rock the exam. Amazing, amazing job. All right, let's bring it back to Dr. Posa.
All right, so thank you so much, Deb. If you guys see some terms that you're not familiar with, I wouldn't worry about it too much. AP World History is really about general trends instead of specific key terms. So for example, if you see a question about that's related to the environment, you might get a question set that's very specific in terms of like a passage, but the actual questions and answers are going to be, how does this one specific thing relate to a general trend during a time period? So for example, if you got a passage, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about, like how do you navigate, what are your strategies for when you confront a passage and it's a place you've never heard of and a particular person you've never heard of, and you think, am I supposed to know that? And the answer is no, you're not supposed to study that particular person. You're supposed to interpret the passage to figure out, how does this connect to what's going on? So if you see like, okay, there's women in a particular place who are planting trees, and you know that the time period is 1900 to the present, then you think, oh, this is about the promotion of environmentally sustainable practices in the 20th century. And then look for answer choices that match up with that trend. So world history isn't really about memorizing necessarily particular examples. It's about understanding trends and then knowing enough information about those trends that when you do get to an SAQ or an LEQ, that you can provide your own examples. You don't need to know every example possible. You need to know the trends, and then you need to know a couple of different examples. So that's what we're going to help you with tonight, actually, is how much information do you need to know, and how do you communicate that information in a way that's going to let you score the points. So we're here to help you with that. So the first thing I want to mention is that there are 3 different types of short answer questions. And each one is going to have a little bit different strategy, but they are the same in some ways. Like you'll use the same strategies to answer them, but they're going to look a little bit different. So the first one, you have to answer. You get a booklet, you have 40 minutes, and you have all 3 questions given to you to answer in 40 minutes. And you can go back and forth between them. You can divide your time however you like. I mean, technically, I guess you have like 12 and a half or 13 minutes per question. But so you have to answer the first 2. SAQ number 1, which has a stimulus. There will be a passage, and it's a secondary source, which means that it's a historian. So we're going to look at some examples, and you're going to get a chance to practice how you approach that particular question. The second one also has a stimulus, and this one is a primary source. Oftentimes, it's a primary source that is visual, like so it might be a chart or a graph or a political cartoon. But sometimes, like the recently released APUSH and AP European History questions were a passage, but it's a primary source, not a secondary source. And you also have no choice. So SAQ number 1, you have to write it. SAQ number 2, you have to write it. But the third SAQ that you write will have a choice, SAQ number 3 or SAQ number 4. It is non-stimulus. It really is going to challenge your ability to recall specific details. But you do get a choice between 2 different options. Each one of these short answer questions will have 3 subpoints, A, B, and C. You get credit only if you have complete sentences. So make sure that you don't use bullet points. Make sure that you are not having like short phrases. You have to have complete sentences, and you're going to label your response A, B, and C. to make it easy for the reader. If you write one big paragraph, then the reader is going to have to try to interpret and pull out information. So you get a sheet of paper for each SAQ that is a box. Stay in the box. One box for each SAQ. Q1, a box, A, B, C. Q2, a box, A, B, C. And then a third box where you do Q3 or Q4, A, B, C. So that's really important. I have had students write outside of the box and then try to lobby and tell me why they should get the points, even though they wrote outside the box. No points for outside the box.
I told them I might leave in like a few minutes, and then I'll join back for my
I think
section.
there's someone who's unmuted
at 8
in our team.
You think we'll be done by 8?
All right. We'll move on. There's some stuff in the background. That's all right. This is what happens. This is what happens in live TV. No, it's not TV, internet streaming, live streaming. Okay, so before we move on, actually, we're going to bring back Deb. And Deb has a few tips on short answer questions that she's going to provide. And then we're going to get into some practice. So you guys, you have a moment to hear Deb's suggestions. And then what we're going to ask you to do, we're going to walk you through some prompts, and you're going to put your responses in the chat. All right, Deb, come on up and give us your words of wisdom.
All right, hey guys, again, great job on the quiz, by the way. Super proud of all of you. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the short answer question. So like Amy said, there's 3 different types of SAQs. The first one based on a secondary source, the first one a primary source, and the third one a non-stimulus, which is a choice between 2 options. So my first word of advice is to make sure you are reading thoroughly. Take little notes on the side. I always like make little doodles with my notes and write yourself lots of tips as you're going. Then when you're answering, you're going to want to first make sure you know the prompt. The prompt is so important, and you got to always like refer back to the question as you answer. Then there's this method called the ACE method that you're going to use, ACE. So the first one is answering and making sure that you're relating back. You can start your topic center sentence with this answer and then combine it with the next one, which is C, which stands for cite. When you cite your evidence, you're not going to actually use like the source or no direct quotation marks, none of that. Just write something very specific, super concise, relate it back. And then lastly, you're going to do examples and explanation. I kind of like combine it in one. So you're going to refer back to that and expand, write down some things that you might remember from class, go along with it, spread it out. You guys got this. I think of any last tips. Make sure that you do that all. You don't need like a conclusion per se, but you can like wrap it up and kind of just like, you guys know what you're doing. You can do it. Have some confidence in yourself. And there you go. All right. Does anyone have like a quick question that they want to ask really quick before you go back? The difference between evidence and examples. Thanks, Rosemary. So evidence is like using what's there and relating that back. Examples, I'd say like pull like more from your own. Like they're super similar though. Any more questions? Yes. Aiden, A stands for answer. And answering the prompts. You can't exactly, like I wouldn't restate the full prompt, but yeah, you can summarize the prompts. You guys are so sweet. Okay. Yep, answer, say, explain. Okay, I feel fully faithful that you guys can do this. And I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Posa to take us through the slides, which will really, really help. And we have some examples coming up that I think will be awesome for you guys to do.
All right, thank you so much, Deb. Really appreciate that. Okay, so let's look at SAQ question number 1. That is the one that you have to answer, and it is the historical passage. So it's a historical argument. This particular type of question, in some ways, it's not necessarily it's the least amount of like outside information you're going to have to provide, because the skill that they are testing is your ability to read and understand a historian's argument. So it's not just about the history, it's about a historian. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe the historian wrote the argument in 2008. Maybe the historian wrote the argument in the last decade. They are making an interpretation or an argument about a historical event. So you're going to be asked to summarize a historian's interpretation of an event in the curriculum, and then to support that with specific evidence, that argument, or maybe challenge that argument. So let's look at it. When you read the passage, the one that I have in your packet, if you have the packet in front of you, that's great, but you can see the passage. I'm also going to pull it up on the slides, but it's about the Mongols. Remember, the Mongols are in Unit 2. They're a core part of the curriculum. Don't sleep on the Mongols. They come up in some way every year. So when you first read the passage, you're going to want to underline the keywords or phrases in the text to identify the core part of the argument. And then you're going to summarize the argument in your own words. That's before even like that you are asked to provide specific information that challenges the argument or supports the argument. You really need to make sure that you understand and are able to summarize what the argument is. The common task that you will be asked is to provide evidence that supports a part of the claim, provide evidence that challenges a part of the claim, and sometimes you will be asked to actually contextualize the author, not just what is happening, but why is the historian writing about it in 2008? So we'll look at examples of each one of those. One thing I want to mention for the SAQ, it's all about the key terms. It's all about the vocab. Vocab, vocab, vocab. Like, if you don't have the vocab, I have a colleague who is an SAQ question leader, meaning she creates the rubrics for the questions and then trains everybody else on a short answer question. And she says, if you don't have the vocab, it's like being a boat on land. You're not going anywhere. So when you are creating your response, it's not about length. Like, it's great to try to write 3 sentences, answer, cite, and explain. But within that, it's the vocab that gets you the point. So make sure that you are using key terms, and you'll get to practice that right now. So this is an example of question number 1 from a previous exam. And it is an example of the type of question that asks you to understand what a historian is saying, and then to support that, and then to challenge that. So I'm going to go ahead and give you some time to read this and try to respond to the first one, right? Well, actually, just try to summarize the argument, right? This one doesn't say summarize the argument. This actually already is asking you in subpoint A to provide a specific piece of information, but there are some times in which you just have to summarize the argument. The AP Euro exam from last week, the passage, the subpoint A was so identify the argument in the passage. So go ahead and just type into the chat, in one sentence, summarize the historian's argument. I'll go ahead and let you guys read it. And you can also find this in the cram pack. I think it's on page 24, which you can find on the AP World Cram Hub. If you want to annotate it, write it down. I see some phrases down here. What you're doing, you're actually, before you're answering the question, you're making sure you understand the argument. So what we're looking for right now is not one economic development that would support Buren's argument. I actually just want you to see if you understand like the core part of the argument. So what is his argument regarding the Mongols and the integration of the Old World? Great. I see that you guys have that. The Mongols are a connection. a connection between the old world and the new. And then this argument is like, in some ways, that they are considered an end of an era, and before a new one is ushered in the early modern period. And in some ways, they are considered the start, right? So it's, did they end the era that came before, or did they start the one that comes after? So let's look at that first question then. You're providing evidence that supports a part of the claim. So this is the claim. This is the part that the Mongol period was a significant step towards closer integration of the old world, both inside and outside the empire's realm. So you need to identify one economic development that would support this argument. There's a couple of things about that. The first one is you want to make sure to repeat every word of the prompt as you're opening. One economic development that would support Biren's argument in the passage regarding the Mongols and the integration of the old world is, like, treat the prompt like a fill in the blank to start, and then you're going to elaborate. But make sure, don't just start answering it. Make sure that you use the language of the prompt when you are beginning your response. And so the other thing I want to mention about this is you'll notice that subpoint A is identify and subpoint B is explain. That is referred to as a task verb. Sometimes you might see identify, sometimes you might see describe, and sometimes you might see explain. I tell my students, treat every subpoint like it is an explain prompt. The bar for identify is like much lower. Identify is maybe like a one sentence, one vocab term, move on. But it's better if that you try to go a little bit further, right? Like treat every response A, B, and C as if it is an explain prompt, where you answer the question explicitly, like just answer the question, provide and elaborate some specific evidence to describe what you're talking about, and then explain how it's connected. It's not an essay. There's no contextualization. You don't need a lot of evidence. You just target your response, answer it, provide vocab, specific vocab that answers the prompt as an example, and then, tie it back, just like one sentence that connects it back to the prompt. The other thing I want to say about this particular prompt is it says economic development. So make sure you are on theme. Students oftentimes won't get the answer, like they won't identify the right vocab because it'll be the wrong theme or the wrong time period. So it's asking for an economic development, and it's asking specifically about the Mongols. All right, so let's look and see how you guys did if this was your prompt. So this is the rubric. Identify one economic development. Examples that earn this point include the following. The stability and size of the Mongol Empire led to the expansion of Silk Road trade. The second one, you could talk about many cities in Afro-Eurasia grew larger and wealthier. And the third example that could earn a point, merchants could travel vast distances across Afro-Eurasia easily and more safely under Mongol rule. So how many of you guys would have gotten the point? I see a lot of Silk Roads, a lot of Silk Roads. That's great. Yes, when you think of the Mongols, think of the revitalization of the Silk Roads because they provided protection so that merchants could travel across Eurasia. That's really an important lesson. That's in Unit 2. All right, so the second one is not just to provide evidence that supports a part of the claim, but then provide evidence that challenges a part of the claim. So now you guys are going to do B. So subpoint B says, explain how one piece of evidence would challenge Biren's argument regarding the Mongols and the quote, the first chapter of a new era. So this is interesting because it's not just what is the argument, but it's a part of the argument. And they're asking you to provide a piece of evidence that disagrees with Biren. That's like, in what way is Biren going to be a little bit off or a little bit wrong? The part then that it's talking about, so when it says the first chapter of a new era, just go to that part in the passage and read the sentence. So it says the Mongol conquests have been defined as the last chapter of the Eurasian transformations of the 10th through the 13th centuries, Yet with the same or even better justification, they can also be regarded as the first chapter of a new era, perhaps the early modern one. So he's making this argument. You've already provided some sort of information that supports a different part of his argument, but how would you challenge Buren's argument? One piece of evidence. So remember, what I like to see that that you guys are doing that I really appreciate is you're using the language of the prompt. You're saying one piece of evidence that would challenge Buren's argument regarding the Mongols in the first chapter of a new era is, and you notice that this one is an explain task verb, so it is going to require a little bit more than probably what you can do in the chat in terms of explanation. You might want to give a couple of more sentences to really explain your reasoning. A lot of times the rubrics, like the answer key, the scoring guidelines, will have something that's like, this is an idea, this is an example of something that would score the prompt, but it's not the full written response. All of these are released and have student samples on the College Board website. So you can see students' samples as well. All right, so let's see how many of you guys would get the right answer. So this is the scoring guidelines, according to the College Board. Examples that earn this point would include the new era only began when connections between Afro-Eurasia and the Americas were established. So the argument is the Mongols aren't the start of the early modern era. The early modern era is really about when Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, and the two hemispheres that previously had been isolated were connected. So this here, it's like when it's talking about how do you define a new era, your strategy could be just looking for a different important event. Like that wasn't the thing that created the early modern era. It was the age of exploration. And you are challenging the idea that it was the Mongols who ushered in the new era of the early modern world. Instead, you're saying it was the Atlantic. The second thing is challenging the significance of the Mongols themselves as being that different than what came before. Saying the Mongol period only saw an expansion of previously existing trends in earlier decades and centuries. They didn't create new trade routes, they revitalized old trade routes. Or you could say the Mongol conquests destroyed as much as they benefited peoples of Afro-Eurasia. So instead of ushering in a new age of civilization, they were just destroying the legacy of the old. Do you have to say all of that? No. No, you do not need to say all of that. You pick one line of reasoning and you say it well, and they don't expect an essay. It is a couple of sentences with vocab embedded that explains your response. And as I said, this particular type of essay, the students that are going to do well are the students who just really pay attention to the historian's argument and understand the argument. So just make sure that you are doing that. All right, you guys, I really see doing very well here in the chat. Very impressed. All right, well then, let's move on to a different part of it. So this C is about intercultural exchange. I'm going to give you an example of two subpoint C's. In this one says, explain how one intercultural transfer or exchange resulted from the Mongol conquests. So of course it says intercultural transfer exchange, go to the passage and see like, what is he talking about specifically? And are they just a passive medium through which like people exchange goods because they revitalized trade routes, or did they themselves actively promote some sort of cultural transfer? See what you can think of. This is good review. If you want to review, you should, I mean, obviously you want to review, that's why you're here, but use prompts, use practice questions. This is a great way to review content and make sure that you're actually, it's not just memorizing key terms that like on flashcards, you're actually applying it. So, all right, well, let's look at the answer. So you could talk about the spread of religion. Under the support of Mongol rulers, religion such as Islam or Buddhism spread. A good, if you're going to explain that, in the case of the Mongol Khanates, maybe you talk about the Ilkhanate with Islam, or in the case of Buddhism, how Kublai Khan and his wife, who set up the Yuan dynasty, they were the Mongol conquerors or the Mongol creators of the Yuan dynasty, the Mongol rulers of China, that they promoted Buddhism. So that's another example. Mongol rulers themselves did adopt the religions of the people they conquered. They themselves were not originally Muslim or Buddhist, but they promoted those religions as part of their own rule. So I think that would be a good example. You could also talk about the local adoption or the adoption of local religions of political practices, the unification and spread of technologies. Hopefully a lot of you guys mentioned gunpowder. I think that's one thing that as AP World teachers we really hammer home, is that the spread of gunpowder and the spread of pathogens such as the Black Plague. So those are the two. When we did our review here, I think night number 1, seems like a long time ago, we really emphasized the impact of Mongol conquest was the spread of technology such as gunpowder and the spread of the Black Plague. Those are the two huge consequences. And then also, Mongol rule brought Islamic geographic, mathematical, and scientific knowledge to China. And if you want to know, like, generally, you don't just want to say that, you want to explain why and how. So always think to yourself, not just that this happened, but why did it happen? How did it happen? What does that look like? So one thing when the Mongols ruled China is that they abolished the civil service exam because they didn't want the Han Chinese in positions of government because they just conquered them. They felt that they were disloyal. So they brought in people from Central Asia. They brought in people from Persia, and they used them in different parts of their empire as part of their strategy of ruling over different territories. So the Mongols actually brought in different people to administer their Chinese empire in the Yuan dynasty. All right, you guys are good on the Mongols. Really impressed. So the last kind of like subpoint C that I want to show you that wasn't part of that, but that you might see, is to actually say, like, why is this historian writing this thing at this time? And this is the why now question that you might see on SAQ number 1. This came up a couple of years ago. I think this was 2 years ago. So this is A and B were very similar. A is like provide a specific piece of evidence that supports the argument. B was provide a specific piece of evidence that challenges the historian's claim. And C was why are historians writing about this particular thing at this particular time? So I'll give you a second, maybe a couple seconds, maybe a minute to read this. This is a claim by a historian about Westernization. See if you can see it. There's a good question about key terms. Can you reuse them? And the answer is no. I have a colleague who says once you use a fact, it's dead, which is kind of a weird way of saying things, but you put a fact out, it's dead. You can't reuse it, can't double dip. So if you use like a fact in A, use a different one in B. And if you use one example in A, it doesn't have to even be consistent with B. If it's answering the prompt of B, they're separate. They're considered separate. All right, so this is great. Gosh, you guys really hit on it, which is one reason why historians in the late 20th century reinterpreted Western imperialism in this particular way. The second and third paragraph, I like did them on a screenshot so that you could see them. The passage itself is interpreting imperialism as something that's very negative, as something that left nations in a place of a lot of ruin. And that these ideals of freedom and self-determination actually turned out to be contradictions. So you guys got it. It's decolonization. That's one particular thing that you could say. So I think I put here, yeah, possible responses. Decolonization encouraged many historians to reinterpret Western imperialism because newly independent Asian and African states had serious economic and political problems that made many historians question the benefits of Western rule. You could talk about how as countries became independent, they rewrote their own histories. and their place in the world. You could talk about how the Cold War contributed to this context. Globalization, that was something that I saw a couple of you mention in the chat. That globalization in the late 20th century led to a lot of scholars critically questioning like Western culture and political values, like the McDonald's being in every country. So all of those things would be good. That's not a question you can study for. That is, in some ways, that's a Unit 9 question. That's a what's going on in Unit 9? What are those trends in Unit 9 that could influence why a historian is like looking back to the past and maybe reinterpreting it? So yes, that I guess in some ways, like just understanding Unit 9 and understanding the trends of the world in which you live in the last couple of decades, that is really going to help you with that kind of prompt. So, all right, well, you guys did a great job with SAQ number 1. So we're going to do SAQ number 2, which is not that different. There's a stimulus, but sometimes this stimulus is an image, a political cartoon, or a chart or a graph. Sometimes it could be a passage, and it would be a primary source. And what do you guys do with primary sources? You hip them, or you source them. You analyze them for audience, purpose, point of view. These are the things that are really going to help you with this primary source. You're going to treat it like you would on a DBQ. You're going to look at it critically. You're going to think about what's going on around this document. Why does this document exist? Who produced it? Who are they talking to? Why, why has this document been published? For what purpose? Those are the kinds of things that will really help you on SAQ number 2, the same things that you've been practicing in your DBQs. So let's look at an example. This one was last year's, and VJ was on this one. I think he scored a lot of these, and I'm sure it was quite the adventure, because to me personally, I've seen some SAQs on APUSH or AP Euro, but I feel like AP World gets the oddest stimulus-based questions for number 2. And sometimes it's like a political cartoon. I'm going to show you one. It was like a chart with a bunch of different dots of population growth. But this is a plan of factories. It is a plan that was drawn from a survey of the area carried out by the British Royal Navy in the city of Canton in southern China in 1856. So if you look at this, what I tell my students is identify what time period is it, what region is it, and what is its theme. And if you can identify that, then you already know a lot. You already know that, okay, it's in China, it's in the 19th century, and it's about Europe in China. So just based on that, separate from actually before you even describe what's going on, or you're asked any questions, you already know some key terms. You already know some vocab. You know that in the 19th century in China, the British were there. They had been pushing opium. You may or may not know the dates of the Opium Wars, like the first Opium War ends like the Treaty of Nanjing is 1842. So the first Opium War begins in 1839. So this is post First Opium War. But either way, you know that there is economic imperialism, that the British pushed their way into China and created spheres of influence, maybe you know or don't know, but that they have asserted themselves and challenged China's ability to set the terms of trade in their own country, particularly in the port of Canton. The port of Canton was where the Qing had forced everyone to trade. And now you have factories, American factories, Danish factories, Spanish factories, French factories. And all of this comes about, beginning with the Opium Wars. That's the first Britain pushing their way into China. So these are all things that even before you look at the prompt, if you see something like this, think about, what do I know about this time period? What do I know about this region? And what is the theme of this particular prompt? Like, what is the topic? So here's another source. And this one, I'm going to have you do this one. So this one is France, 19th century women's roles. And I want you to think of some key terms, right? If you think of France in the 19th century, and the theme here is about social structure. go ahead and type into the chat, because this is like when you see a prompt, think of the vocab. What vocab can I use in my response? Key terms, vocab. Oh man, you guys got some good key terms here. Olympia de Gouges, suffrage, feminism, French Revolution, patriarchy, enlightenment. Yeah, so these are, so someone's already practiced this one today. That's good. So an important thing to note is that sometimes the documents reflect ideals, sometimes they reflect values rather than reality. So this is like a mass-produced poster. And it's meant to then like not actually be descriptive. It's meant to be in some ways prescriptive, maybe like, or maybe it reflects society at the time, maybe it's a critique of society at the time. Either way, it offers a very particular point of view about the situation of women at the time. So you guys already came up with some great key terms for those. So let's look at these 3 prompts. The first one is identify one way in which the views reflected in the image represent a continuity with traditional notions of gender roles. And that brings me to the historical thinking skills that you could be asked. You might be asked in these stimulus-based multiple choice questions, or sorry, in these short answer questions. You might be asked about continuity and change. You might be asked about comparison, similarity, and difference. And you might be asked about causation. So that is true for those 3 historical thinking skills in the LEQ, and the DBQ, and in the SAQs. Those are the things you might see. So a continuity is something that was there before and something that continued even after a moment of change. So in this, let's look at it again. You have it in your packet, but maybe you can see here. What are some traditional roles that you can think of? Yes, maybe they give you a map, maybe they give you a picture. Maybe they give you just a weird graph. What if they just gave you like a normal source? That would be amazing. That's all right. We're preparing for, they can throw anything at you and you will have something to say. That's what we're here for. All right, so traditional notions of gender roles could include, like, for example, the seamstress, the farmer. So you would think about the domestic, right? You would think about caretakers, domestic roles. And then, for example, one way in which the views reflected in the image represent a change from traditional notions of gender roles. What would you say for that? I think it's probably hard for you to see. Even on, I looked at the packet, even on the packet, it's a little bit hard to see. So, but you can even anticipate like what those captions might be, which is like women working, women in factories, you know, different kinds of roles in which women are not in the home in the 19th century. All right, but this is the one I really want to focus on, which is explain one way in which the format or intended audience of the source may have influenced the way in which gender roles are portrayed in the image. So this is the sourcing. This is what you did yesterday in the DBQ, where you're looking at some sort of sourcing in order to explain what is the content of the document. Format or intended audience of the source. How might that have influenced the way in which gender roles are portrayed? So I'd like to see your analysis of that. This is HIP. They're asking for HIP on the SAQ. This is one of the things they do. Talk about perspective, talk about point of view. In this case, they want to know about audience. How does the audience? So let's look again. I'll pull it up for you so that you can see the source line. This is going to be when you really want to pay attention to the source line. So it is the different social positions of women is the title, and it is mass-produced poster offered for sale to individuals and institutions in France, circa 1890. All right, you guys have a really good sense of like a mass-produced poster. I like what you're doing here in terms of distributing or connecting audience and purpose as well, and the format. So one thing that I want to point out is that all the work you've been doing all year with primary sources and analyzing primary sources is the skill that they're testing here. It's not, in some ways, it's a little bit intuitive. It's a little bit like common sense. You know, if it's mass produced, then is it trying to critique something? Is it trying to promote something? Here is what the College Board says would be an acceptable response. The poster was aimed at individual women or women's schools, so it was probably intended to reinforce existing ideas about women. Many people could still not read in the late 19th century, so it uses images as well as text. The image was aimed at a society in which agriculture was still important, so it applauds the work of peasant women. The image was produced in a Catholic society, so it mentions God and portrays religious women. The inclusion of the clothier and the worker in the image is due to the changing working environments and gender roles in industrializing societies. The placement of a woman merchant at the top of the image shows that women were gaining increasing economic independence in the 19th century. Do you have to say all of those things? No, you just need to pick one part of the image and just explain it. Like maybe the nun is there because France is Catholic and it is portraying a religious woman because that's an important social role still in France. So that's the kind of thing you want to do. And BG, do you want to mention maybe from your experience, there was also on that survey, or maybe we'll pull BJ in before we go into the next section, but BJ had to score a question that was like, why does the image, that particular survey, that particular British map, why does the image say what it does at the time? So we can circle back to that. All right. That is SAQ number 2, the primary source. This was a couple of years ago as well.
I was just going to interject. I was debating if I was going to come on or not.
BJ has scored this SAQ number 2. He scored last year. That one about the survey. I'm going to pull that back up for you if you want to offer any specific information about what it was like to score that.
Well, I did the thing with the Canton and the letter A option, where they basically ask what caused this. And a lot of students wanted to say the Industrial Revolution, which is correct, but it's not correct enough. They needed to state the European or most likely the British imperialism, because that is what kind of started this, because it's actually the British that kind of motivate this all to happen. And it was really unfair because we're at the table and we're like unhappy that so many kids are getting it wrong because of one word. But that's what College Board does, because their thought was it makes it more accurate to say European or British. It gives it more context. It gives it more causation. I just think it's mean. So what happened is a lot of kids that could have scored a 3 out of 3 were getting a 2. To be honest, what's really funny is though, when that happens to you, everybody gets hit. So just imagine, because of that one word, most people are now getting letter A wrong. So let's use this as a good and a bad. The good is try to be descriptive. If you can give an adjective, give an adjective. Don't just say trade, say increase in trade. All right. Also, when you feel that you don't know anything for letter C, most of the world doesn't either. It's okay. Skip it, make something up, move on. All right. So I don't want to take up more of your time, but yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Thanks, BJ. That's really helpful. That be as descriptive as possible, not just economic imperialism, not just European economic imperialism, but British imperialism. That is kind of how it goes. They're looking for like key vocab, key terms, and the more specific you can be, the better. But also you don't get points off. So there was a question about like, what does the merchant have to do with anything? It is like any image in that document you say is there because there's someone in French society, there's something in French society that reflects at the time. So, you know, the elevation of women who are now able to participate in commerce, like middle-class women. You may feel like you're BSing or making stuff up, but what you're doing is just like trying to infer, okay, based on this document, like why might it exist in this way? So that's, don't just leave it blank, write something up and you might get points for it on that subpoint C where they're asking you to interpret a text. And you can say likely, like you can say, it is likely that this document, this part of the document is here because it reflects an, you know, important thing in French society, like with the nuns. So the point is don't leave it blank. See, you know, make something up and you may be right. And this one here is an example of something a couple of years ago that really threw people off. But those who took AP Human Geo, man, they really felt like they nailed this one. So it was a little bit, it caught some students off guard who hadn't taken AP Human Geo. But this is Unit 9. So this for me is a good example. Like I tell my students, don't sleep on Unit 9 just because it's like, oh, it's 8 to 10%. And it's just like culture, anime, Bollywood, and you know, globalization, the internet. But they really want you to understand, not just that like these things are happening, but how it affects how people live and what people do and how they move and where they go and how long they live. Like there are real consequences to the changes in Unit 9. So this is an example of an SAQ, and you can get an SAQ just on Unit 9. So just, it's not about the details, it's about the trends and really understanding the trends. And in this particular case, what theme is it out of all of the themes? The themes are social, political, interaction with the environment, cultural, economic, and technology. The theme is interaction with the environment because it's going to include population change. So interaction with the environment includes disease, population changes, and which is referred to as demographic change. Demographic just refers to population. And then the questions that are associated with this one are about the social consequences of this kind of change. So what does it mean for a society when there is, like, why might a wealthier society have longer life expectancies? And what are the social consequences for a society that does have a longer life expectancy? Yeah, so some of the questions will be specific to like, what does this mean socially? What are the consequences for that? But if you see a population chart, the interaction with the environment is the general theme, demographic change. I think that might be a big one this year, actually, on the AP. Disease, migration, and the social consequences of those population shifts, I think might be big on the AP. So, but you guys got this. All right, the last SAQ, number 3 and 4, and then we were going to take a break. SAQ 3 and 4 are basically, do you know stuff? There's no secrets to this one. They will ask you a time period, they will ask you a region, and they will give you a theme, and you have to pick the vocab out of your brain and put it on paper. That is essentially the non-stimulus-based short answer question. Number 1 is that historian argument. Number 2 is primary source analysis. And you do have to know some things, but it is a lot of interpretation. 3 and 4, do you know stuff? Now, the good news is you have a choice between number 3 or number 4. So this is an example from a few years ago. Number 3, identify one continuity in the political system of China in the period 1200 to 1750. So that's good. That's 2 time periods. The first time period of 1200 to 1450. The second time period is 1450 to 1750. And then B is identify one change in the political system of China in the period 1200 to 1750. And C, explain one way in which the political continuities in China influenced the development of the global economy in the period 1200 to 1750. Now, one thing I'll say is the reason why students don't get the point and is oftentimes they are outside the time period, right? So they think of something, but what they think of is outside the time period. So it is really important that you have those clear kind of divisions between like what is going on from 1200 to 1450. What are the dynasties I can talk about? The Song, Yuan, Ming for China. And then from 1450 to 1750, who's there? It's the Ming and the Qing. So, and then as you're thinking about that, what I like to encourage students to do is to like write these things down. So what are the dynasties of China in this time period? See if you can think about it. And then when you see them laid out, you're like, okay, most of these dynasties have an emperor who claims the mandate of heaven, right? And, you know, we had talked about that in our review. And then for change, if you're talking about a change in Eurasia that happens after 1200, it probably has to do with the Mongols as well. So, I mean, it's important to, there's a lot of different changes that you could talk about, but, you know, certainly that's one that's really important, pretty consistent. What are some other things you could think of? That's good. I see a lot of continuities talking about the civil service exam implemented by the Song and then later by the Ming and the Qing. So absent that brief period of time under the Mongols, under the Yuan dynasty, the civil service exam is a continuity. It's not abolished until 1905. That's a great one. If it's you can use two. You can say it was there in the Song and then it's there in the Ming. So a good thing about continuity that you can think about is you're saying it's here and then fast forward in time, it's also here. So your two pieces of evidence prove that like this is something that continues. And you can qualify it and say like minus the brief interruption, there is this continuity as long as you are demonstrating that you understand it. So yeah, I think that the change in the dynasties, you would just want to specify like, okay, the Yuan dynasty was the Mongols. The Ming represents a restoration of native rule, you know, kind of similar, a reemergence of that Neo-Confucianism of the Song. And then the Qing are different. The Qing are Manchu. So the Qing do everything the Ming did in terms of like centralized bureaucracy, mandate of heaven, having an emperor, keep the civil service exam. But ethnically, they're a different group and they put themselves at the top of the ruling. So do you need to say all of that? No, you just identify one. Now you'll notice that's an identify prompt, so the bar is lower, but you guys are great students. So you're not going to settle. You're going to try to sail over the bar, not just like squeak over the bar, and write a couple more sentences than you think you need to. The truth is you only need the one with the key vocab they're looking for. But just to make sure, because maybe it's like the second or third sentence that is the one sentence they're looking at. So make sure that you do a little bit more. All right, and then the last one, explain one way in which the political continuities in China influenced the development of the global economy in the period 1200 to 1750. You'll see that C is a little bit harder. That is one in which you have to connect political continuities, so something that the Chinese government is doing consistently over time, to a different theme, which is the global economy. Now, one thing that's always important to keep in mind is that China exports goods that everyone wants. The pivot of the global economy is in the Indian Ocean from 1200 to 1750. India and China are exporting goods that everybody else wants until 1750, when the British get machines to make all their goods. So that's always something that you can think about. And the Chinese government often encourages commerce, encourages and sponsors commerce in order to manufacture goods for export. Okay, that review packet answer key will be coming to you tonight, I promise. Like halfway through that thing. And for the next stimulus-based multiple choice question, we're not going to answer this one. But what I want to point out is that number 4, if you don't know number 3 and you're like, I don't remember anything about China. Well, number 4 is like the same thing, except a different region. So identify one continuity in the political systems of South or Southeast Asia in the period 1750 to 1900. Identify one change in the political systems of South or Southeast Asia in the period 1750 to 1900. And then C is the exact same. So you see how number 3 is China and number 4 is South or Southeast Asia. But there's one other difference, which is time period, 1750 to 1900. So now they've shifted. It's like the same theme, the same historical thinking skill, but they're asking about a different time period and a different region. So that's why you want to make sure to pay attention to time period and region and to make little notes to yourself, like, what do I know is going on in South Asia, 1750 to 1900? If you see South Asia, 1750 to 1900, there's a key moment in there. The 1857 Indian Revolt. That's a key moment in terms of political change in South Asia. If you don't remember anything about South Asia in that period, you can talk about Southeast Asia, or you can go back and talk about China. So you have options, but that's really where your content knowledge is going to be tested. Because as my colleague says, if you don't have the vocab, you are a boat on land. So you want to make sure to have that vocab, but that's why you're here and that's why you're doing that. All right, let's take a break. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. BJ, do you mind putting up the timer? You guys need to stretch. BJ needs to get some of his snacks.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to take over with the LEQ and some thoughts on the SAQ. So like we did for the last 2 nights, I am going to go ahead and share my screen with the concept that this is a true, please share, that this is meant to be a true 5-minute break for everybody. You can go ahead and post things, but I'd rather you not. We're not reading it. We're not commenting because even the adults in the room want to take a break. You have been busy. You deserve a break as well. I'm struggling to share my screen. It's acting like somebody's already there. A screen is actively being shared. Ask the presenter to stop sharing if you want to share media. Are you still? I don't think you are.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, guess what? We're still taking a 5-minute break. Go ahead.
5-minute break. All right, guys, see you get back here in 5 minutes.
Bam. That's so annoying. All right. Hi, we're back. I hope you're all doing well. Let's make sure baby got back. Looks like you guys have been kept busy. All right. Yes, I do, Praveen. Smart man. So welcome back, everybody. Before we move into the LEQ, I just wanted to throw a little bit of something on Amy's presentation on the SAQ because she brought it up. Questions 3 and 4 are all about knowing things. Thus, you have to first decide on number 3 or 4 which you know more about. That could be literally you know the answer or you know the context. So just please understand everybody else in the world finds 3 and 4 to be a challenge. So you need to decide on 3 or 4 which is better for you. Now, I tell my students this, and I'm not saying they listen to me. I think it's okay that you go into the SAQ going for a 2 out of 3 for each of them. When you think you're going to get a 3 out of 3, and that's the type of pressure you're putting yourself under, you're only stressing yourself out for later on the DBQ and the LEQ. And I don't think that's healthy. I think you just need to chill. Realize that a 67% on the SAQ is a 4. All right. So it might even benefit you to elaborate on letter A, skip letter B, and then elaborate on letter C. Again, not saying my students listen to that. I just don't think it's a bad approach. On the opposite side, I do think 13 minutes per question 1, 2, and then 3 or 4. I do think 13 minutes is enough. Earlier in the chat, we were getting inundated with you saying you knew how many sentences to write. And your teachers told you. And it's all wrong. There are students that can take letter A and write 5 sentences on the topic and not get the point because they didn't answer the prompt. So you have to answer the prompt ATP no matter what. Please do not try to write a lot versus reading the question again. And it is frustrating, very frustrating, when I read somebody get a SAQ part in 1 sentence. It's poorly written, but it works. And I'll read it twice. I'll read it twice hoping to take off a point, but I can't. Sometimes 1 sentence is better than 5. So no matter what your teachers have said, you have to find your happy place. All right. It's seeming like none of you are listening to me right now. I'm reading the chat. Am I on mute? Is this thing working? I do like Imagine Dragons, Ginger, but let's come back. I haven't seen them live. So we are now going to move on to the LEQ. All right. And I like to pull that out. Yes, Josh, you're locked in. Okay, so the LEQ, historically proven to be the worst essay you will ever write in your life. We're going to talk about this tomorrow night, but you will do 55 multiple choice. You'll have like 2-second break. You'll go right into 3 SAQs in 40 minutes. So you've already been thinking for 1 hour and 40 pretty much. You'll have a break. You will write a DBQ. Your DBQ will be 1 hour and 10 minutes long. So now you're about to answer an LEQ that you barely know anything about. It's going to sound fake. It's going to be made up history. And it's just got to be on paper the best you can breed. And really, and I'm telling you, this is my numbers. You can get a 3 out of 6 and walk out of there proud. You can get a 2 out of 6 and still get a 4. If you get a 2 out of 6, but are able to do well previously, then the LEQ is nothing more than getting contextualization and thesis, like one paragraph. And the way I teach the LEQ, I teach it to be a 5-paragraph essay that I just told them this the other day. It only needs to be 2 paragraphs. Yes, better students, stronger students will write 3, but it just doesn't need to be. You don't need a 5 out of 6. You don't need a 6 out of 6. I don't think it's a make or break a grade. Like if you look over my numbers that the College Board gives me, it's not overly impressive. I don't like walk around saying, oh man, my LEQs, they got a 2.7 average. But I have a very high % pass rate because they get their points the other places. All right. So let's go ahead and dive into the long essay question. The LEQ will be the last essay you write. Now, you can write the LEQ before the DBQ, but that would be stupid. The DBQ is worth 25% of your grade. The LEQ is worth 15% of your grade. You want to try harder on the greater percent. So what's going to happen is on the LEQ, you will get question 2, 3, and 4. They're all FRQs. You'll get questions 2, 3, and 4. You will choose one of them to do. They're probably going to have different time periods, early, middle, recent. They will have a similar theme, maybe economic, and they will have a similar thinking skill like change. So what you're going to find, is that as long as you address economics, you can do any of the questions. It's just which one do you know the most about. The thesis points for the LEQ is the same as the DBQ. You got introduction with a contextualization and a thesis. Now, every AP reader will tell you contextualization can be given anytime in the essay, but students tend to do it right out of the gates. Remember last night, I taught you the before approach, starting your DBQ and now your LEQ with the word before. Now, it's an argumentative essay. You are not trying to summarize. Let's just say the essay was for some reason about the American Revolution, and you took a very deep dive into 3 members of the Sons of Liberty and how tall George Washington was. Just because you went deep on something, it matters nothing, because the only thing that matters is, are you addressing the argument? Are you answering the prompt? Are you proving your point? So finally, you do need to provide evidence like a DBQ. I don't know how tall George Washington was. I'm going to say 6'2". Let me know. True? 6'2", was I right? Seemed to be a tall drink of water. 7'6". All right, so for the DBQ, you had to have either 3 documents addressed, or 6 documents you used. For the LEQ, they also have different rubric points, and I'm going to get to them. So I'm going to be very clear on what evidence you need and how much you need. So these are your rubric points: contextualization, thesis, evidence 1, evidence 2, analysis and reasoning, and complexity. We should just delete complexity, like we said last night. So here's the difference. Contextualization is the same. Check. Thesis is the same. Check. Complexity, you're not going to get. Check. So what are these other evidence points? If you use 2 pieces of evidence relative to the prompt, related to the prompt. If the prompt is about China, 1900s, communism, and you give 2 pieces of evidence related to that, you get evidence 1. Breathe in. That just means you need to say Mao Zedong, Great Leap Forward. It doesn't mean you have to explain thoroughly Mao or thoroughly Great Leap Forward. It's almost like name dropping. Now then, what's evidence 2? Evidence 2 is where you answer the prompt using 2 pieces of relative information. Remember the difference here. Being related to the prompt means it just makes sense that you're talking about Mao and Great Leap Forward. But answering the prompt means you're actually using Mao, Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution to answer a prompt about how Mao affected the development of China after 1949. Personally, if I had to, I think many of you can get thesis and evidence 1. There's your 2 points. I personally like students to write a 3-prong, a 3-piece, like we learned yesterday, thesis. But you just don't have to. You don't. I'm guaranteeing it. Sometimes the bar for thesis is so low that it can be 1 sentence setting up 1 body paragraph. I don't know. We'll see how it goes for you. I told you yesterday with great confidence that every student I teach gets the thesis point on the LEQ and the DBQ. It might be the only point they get, but it's the point they get. So you don't want to rush that. So if I'm going to tell you, I think contextualization, thesis, evidence 1, and evidence 2 are all within your ability. It's not something overly complicated. And do notice, you don't have to write 5 body paragraphs. You don't have to write a book. It will be the worst essay. Even the kid that gets a 6 out of 6, it's still their worst essay. All right, we're almost done. So then what is analysis and reasoning? That is where you pause and you say why, and you address the historical reasoning skills. So if the prompt addresses change, why change? You're not just going to state change. I'll give an example. Stating change would be saying, at one time, China had Mao Zedong as its communist leader. And later, it had Deng Xiaoping as its communist leader. Mao Zedong was a dedicated ideologue communist. Deng Xiaoping was a pragmatic, almost capitalist member of the Communist Party. Good. That's facts. That's evidence 2. But why is there change? Why did China go from a Mao-like figure to a Deng Xiaoping-like figure. I get a little excited here. Why? That's what College Board wants. College Board does not want you in one body paragraph telling us everything about Mao and another body paragraph telling us everything about Deng Xiaoping and not relating them together. That's not an essay. That's a summative essay. That's not argumentative. So that can be done in your body paragraph. Now, finally, yes, Ginger, I get excited when I talk about writing, whatever. The complexity point for me, if I were your teacher, I would just remind you all to address, if the prompt is about change, address continuities throughout. If the prompt is about causes, address effects throughout. If the prompt is about similarities, address differences throughout. Now, I'm going to just state this like this. I used to teach my kids the 2 and 1 approach. Bill Strickland taught this to me. He's an AP World guru. 2 body paragraphs on change, 1 body paragraph on continuity. But the problem with that approach in the modern rubric is they don't want you to separate things out in their own body paragraphs. That's not complex. That's formulaic. So they would rather you ingrain in your essay. And that's why I'm saying it's really hard. Here's another reason why it's hard. If you wrote the most banging, amazing DBQ, like the DBQ that people are going to use as an exemplar, then you probably don't have enough time to really write that good of an LEQ. You can't do both. All right. Now, I'm going to move on, but I want to just check out some things that are going on in the chat. Spinning Jenny. That is Spinning Jenny. I teach my kids the 2 and 1, but it likely won't work. So they should try to blend them together, but that takes a lot of time and thinking. And in the 30 minutes you got, it's going to be hard. And by the way, I made up the prompt about Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping, but boy, I love that topic all day long. Hi, Gina. All right. I'm not seeing anything else I need to address in the chat. There was a couple comments about my hair. I don't know if they were good or bad, so I'm just going to skip it. Who's Deng Xiaoping? Google him. There's got to be a YouTube video on the topic. I love it. Cameron, why am I waiting? Oh, thanks, Praveen. Yeah. Now, typically, they're not going to have an LEQ on the Great Leap Forward. They're going to give an LEQ about the impact of communism on China, where you might use the Great Leap Forward, Cultural Revolution, Tiananmen Square. And I contend they wouldn't even ask about China. They would say East or Southeast Asia. They would open it up for you to write about Korea, China, Vietnam. I mean, if you take an APUS, you good. All right, let's go. Let's keep going now. So a little bit of practice, because that's what we often do. Contextualization matters. It is on both the DBQ and the LEQ. Some of you have been doing contextualization all year. Some of you learned about it last night for the first time. Not every teacher dives deep into the actual rubrics. I would try to infuse in your contextualization 3 pieces of evidence, specifics, knowledge. Don't just say trade, say increasing trade. Don't just say trade in between powers. What powers? Is it going to be like an East Asian power, such as the Qing, or is it going to be the gunpowder empires of the Ottoman? Like, try to say to yourself, is there a noun or proper noun I could use here? So I made this prompt up. You're welcome. This prompt is not College Board, it's BJ. But look how much fun it is. Develop an argument, write an essay that evaluates similar political and/or economic effects on Afro-Eurasian powers caused by the Mongolian expansion between 1350 and 1600. So you're not talking about the Mongols in the essay and summarizing it. You're going to say, because of the Mongols, there were similar effects caused by it. So you, in this prompt, the reason why I'm having fun here is it's a causation prompt, cause and effect. It's a comparison prompt. College Board has opened up their prompts to be, I love Skyland, to be very welcoming. When Amy and I were teaching 6 years ago, they were very specific. We want a continuity and change essay. We want a comparison essay. Now they're saying, just use what skills you have to answer it. Now, we're not even answering this fake prompt. We're going to do contextualization. So if the essay is all about the effects of Mongol expansion on on political and economic effects of Afro-Eurasian powers caused by Mongol expansion, what can you write as the contextualization? What would help the reader understand the powers that follow the Mongols? So go ahead and give a 1, 2, or 3 sentence contextualization in the chat. Khalib Harris, go with what you were saying. Don't quit. I'm looking for people to bring up trade. I'm seeing it. So that shows interconnectivity. I'm looking for people to talk about Silk Road. So that's a geographic location, a proper noun. I'm looking some people to talk about nomads, spread of religion. I am missing Pax Mongolica. I'm missing religious toleration. So there are a couple things that I'm missing here, but trade is good. Praveen's rocking it. Skate busters, you can't just do that. That's just cheating. I don't mind where power duck went there. I would probably add another detail. Some of you have a rich amount of detail, knowing each of the ilkinates, conates, sorry. So, what I wanted you to do is create a context about the Mongols that allows you then to go to the next step and talk about how the powers have to deal with that. Like, I would probably say gunpowder empires are going to emerge with political rule and superiority and authoritarianism, dictatorship, war, because of what the Mongols had done. I might talk about now that there is the Mongols, because of trade, the Silk Road, Pax Mongolica, that later on we are going to have a diverse amount of trade, and the rising powers of the Mughals will put them on the map to the point where, you know, the British are going to be knocking soon after. So I really liked where you guys went. This was a very convoluted prompt because I did not want you having a lob pitch that you all knocked out. I wanted it to be something to be thinking about. Now, you can't say the Mongols are the exception and then move on. Just because John Green says something repetitively doesn't mean the AP reader finds that to be historically thorough enough. So the Mongols spread power, and because they spread power, there was a lot of people having power in Afro-Eurasia. And those powers had technologies that allowed them to expand their power and influence. So you see what I'm doing there? I'm using these vague words, like I'm a politician. You know, Dranby 2024. I'm using very vague statements that are accurate, but they're never going to get you College Board credit. Great. Thank you for all those that dropped some stuff in. I'm sure my crew is in the background trying to at least give you some likes. I'm really impressed by, you know, Josh, I remember you from last night. There we go, Katie. I like it. You guys can run my campaign. It starts tonight. So who's on the top of the ticket? Is Dranby on the top or is Heimler on the top? I don't know. I'm going to have to arm wrestle that guy. He's a legend. So here is an example context. Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes of Inner Asian Steppe in 1206, which led to a series of conquests in Russia, the Middle East, and China, creating the largest contiguous empire in world history. After his death, his descendants ruled over successor states called Khanates, which replaced previous states such as the Song dynasty. The effects on Mongol rule on these regions varied. Enter your thesis. The fun part is Dr. Posa, when she went over the Khanates, gave great detail that led you to have this information. Now, Emma's dropping an F-bomb there. I get it. You don't have to say Genghis Khan united the Mongols. You can just say the Mongol tribes. united much of Asia, which led to a series of expansions into Russia and other places, creating a very large empire. After his death, his descendants broke the empire apart, period. It could be vaguer than that. What I think we're trying to do is teach you what you can try to do. Try to use proper nouns. In the absence of proper nouns, you give what you can give. Thank you. All right, so let me see what's going on in here in the chat. Well, Jonathan Kaiser, context doesn't answer the prompt. It's setting the prompt up. So he's right or she's right because your context in a body paragraph wouldn't make sense. Because in a body paragraph, you're focusing on answering the prompt. So yes, your teacher's got it. All right, I like where we all went. Let's try it one more time. Analyze the changes in commerce in the Indian Ocean from 1200 to 1750. To answer this, you need to set up what the regions around the Indian Ocean might have looked like before there was commerce coming and changes coming. Genevieve, yes, you can do context before or during. I'm just a before type. You could also be as simple as around 1200. There were, and I would go back to like, this is unit 2. I would say to myself, what did I learn in unit 1? The global tapestry. Yes, spinning Jenny. So it doesn't necessarily have to be before, but you can be generic and say before 1200, but you can say around 1200 ... and see where your brain goes. To be honest, Samantha, I don't know how many diasporic economic merchant communities there were that, prevalent before 1200. Don't define the Indian Ocean trade network because that's what you're going to be developing later in your essay, is the development of it, the spread of Islam, the unification of states, is merchant economic communities. Oops. You could maybe talk about the rise of the Swahili coast speaking a similar language, thus being able to communicate and then trade. Maybe you could talk about the birth of trade and commerce in the Mediterranean, lateen sail. So I'm going to go to Anna. Prior to the Indian Ocean trade, nations, maybe not the best word, but powers surrounding the ocean developed and grew on their own. I just need something to help us know what you mean. Obviously, this is before Zheng He and the Ming sailed. So you could talk about powers like the Song dynasty grew in more isolation or only traded largely through the Silk Road, or that the Silk Road was not as prevalent because the Mongols had not expanded and centralized it, creating Pax Mongolica. So many places you can go. Now, there's a lot of people. This kid, Aryan Patel. Let's see what he has. So Aryan is name dropping every location he has in his head. I see that basically at the end of that paragraph, Aaron, you're ending with kind of addressing the prompt, answering the prompt. But I like where you started. So that was great. Smart kid. Yeah. Ginger, FYI, I want your teacher to be harder than College Board. All right, let's see an example. You may not like this. Maybe you just like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. New technologies, innovations such as the magnetic compass and astrolabe, along with new ship designs such as the dhow, led to the expansion of maritime trade in the Indian Ocean before 1200. Although 1200 CE, the revitalization of the Silk Roads under the Mongol conquest and later the 1450, the opening of the Atlantic world changed commerce in the Indian Ocean. Insert thesis. So this contextualization chose to talk about the introduction of technology. Remember spice tea. How can you use one part of spice tea in your contextualization? This is using tea for technology. Now, but okay, I'm just going to see what anything else is in the chat. A lot of you are still answering it. And a lot of you want to be checked, and I understand that. Yeah, I see a lot of you are trying to name drop places. That will help. I see some technologies being mentioned. Dhow was more of an Arab ship that dominated Mediterranean trade. All right. So now that we've done contextualization, a thesis is an answer to the prompt, such as 1 or 2 sentences. We did thesis last night. I just want to sit back on historical reasoning skills, which some people like to mention, maybe historical thinking skills. This is what these LEQs are all about. They're not about summarizing Mao and Deng. They're talking about the prompt, be it change or comparison. So here is an LEQ prompt. You will not be writing it. They first set it up within the period 1450 to 1750. The global increase in trans-regional contacts led to both the expansion and contraction of existing religions, as well as the development of new religious practices. The College Board wants everybody to know that. Now, here is the prompt that you're answering. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which military or conquest was the main cause of religious change in this period. So, some of you would think that this is a change essay or a causation essay. I just want to set it up with it's everything essay. So, how can you answer this? If it's a causation answer, how did military conflict affect religion? If it's a CCOT, how did military conflict change religion? If it's a comparison, how did military conflict similarly affect religion and change? Meaning, you're using any historical reasoning skill, any that seems rational to answer the prompt. I'm just reading some comments. Some people seem they like this. Yeah, I don't have a time period. Sorry. All right. So this is the type of thing I want to remind you. They don't demand you to answer a prompt a certain way, but you have to decide on what historical reasoning skill you're going to do. I think I need to say that again. You need to decide. And then that's the focus of your writing. It's not summarizing everything about Mao, everything is about Deng. It's about causes, change, continuity, comparison. I could be dramatic on that. So, what does causation look like? Well, you have a cause, it leads to an effect. Try to have one effect, try to have another effect. Now, those different examples are evidence, but the reasoning is, why did that effect happen? Not that it happened, but why it happened. Too often, kids want to dive into telling me, I always use the United States as American Revolution. I'm sorry. They want to elaborate on the Boston Tea Party, tell me about the event, or they want to tell me everything about the Second Continental Congress. But if the essay was, how did British actions affect the colonists, they needed to talk about the Sons of Liberty to answer that. They needed to use the Second Continental Congress to answer that. So, the why matters. So, I tell my students, say, this is because. This change is because. This similarity is because. This difference is because. You see what I'm doing here? I'm using repetition, repetitiously. So let's hear from one of our wonderful student presenters. This is Adeline giving us an overview of causation.
Hi, I'm Adeline, and today we're going to be talking about causation. Causation can be a little confusing, so first let me give you a real-world example. Saying Katie is wet would be stating the effect of a cause. That would be kind of like saying World War I happened. But in your essays, you want to give a little more detail and give the context and the causation as to why they happened. So Katie is wet because I threw water on her. So in your essays, you want to give causes as to why certain things happened. It makes it more clear for your reader, and it makes you seem like you know more about what you're talking about. For example, if you want to talk about World War I, you want to give the causation by saying that World War I was caused by Franz Ferdinand's execution because of the Black Hand, a terrorist group. So the key points of causation to note are that, first of all, things usually aren't monocausal. And basically what that means is that there's multiple causes for each thing. And if you want to go into depth, you want to talk about multiple of these. It gives context and it can help you further strengthen your thesis. So you want to talk about the multiple causes. Second of all, you want to note that there are both short-term and long-term causes of different events. So this could be helpful if you want to talk about an event that was building up for a long time, and then the specific short-term things that really pushed it over the edge and caused the event to happen. And is kind of obvious, but it is a cause and effect scenario. So for any type of causation, you really want to just emphasize the causes of the effects, which is normally the things that you're talking about in your essay. I think that's pretty much all you need to know about causation. And thank you to Katie for her generous contributions to this video. Don't worry, you're going to crush it on your AP World exam.
Thank you very much, Adeline. Adeline does well in class because she knows history, but she knows how to present history. And that is what you need to remember on the LEQ. Having a brain dump of every fact you've ever learned doesn't outweigh you thinking about what you've learned.
Hi, I'm Adeline, and today we're
Now, let's say the essay was about Spanish conquest of the Americas. The effect could be conversion of indigenous people to Christianity. Another effect could be the development of syncretic beliefs. You can have a whole paragraph about conversion and a whole paragraph about syncretic beliefs. But if you want the reasoning point, you need to say why. Why were the conquistadors, the Spanish, so determined to convert? All right. Reconquista, Inquisition, Jesuits, response to the Reformation, development of syncretic beliefs. Why did syncretic beliefs emerge? Syncretic beliefs emerged because of the blending. It's actually the definition, the blending of different cultures desiring not to lose their traditional beliefs, rather accept other beliefs and blend them in. Gold, God, and glory. Thank you. So I love historical thinking skills because it will help you get that 4 or 5 on the LEQ. Now, unfortunately, there's the CCOT. And the CCOT all falls apart when kids don't know the acronym. Continuity and change over time. Change over time. When I was in 9th grade, I was shy. When I went off to college, I became obnoxious. That's change. Why change? I changed from 9th grade till 19 because I became more confident when I found success in small little things. In 10th grade, I started getting the highest A's in history. I didn't know I was good at history. Just all of a sudden, like, kids were copying my homework, right? And then in college, I became so interested in history classes that I became part of the first history club, and I got very political in some organizations. Over time, I changed because I gained confidence. Continuity. It's a weird word. You need to learn it. The test is in 2 days. Continuity is how things have stayed the same. When I was in 9th grade, I was very reliant on some of my best friends. When I was 19, I was still reliant on some of my best friends. My best friends helped, this is my because statement, helped me get through some family issues. We grew up together. They had family issues. We grew up together. We all played soccer together. We were all in the same classes together, and we all had a certain amount of comfortableness with each other. Continuity and why continuity is huge. So in a CCOT, you'll talk about the before early in your essay. You're going to state change and why change. Let's hear some more about this. This is Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela, and today we're going to be looking at one of the most important historical thinking skills for the AP exam, continuity and change. So this is kind of looking more at your ability to analyze how things change or stay constant over time. And so what you want to do with that is just not only state what happened, but also explain the reasons for why that happened. So for example, if we're looking at social hierarchies in period 3, you could say that though monarchies, especially in places like Europe, are still very powerful and present, ideas of the Enlightenment are what are causing many of the independence movements that we see sparking at the time, such as in America, Haiti, and other places in Latin America, to happen. So yeah, just make sure that when you're writing your essays, you're really looking at why things changed or didn't change. And don't worry, you're all gonna crush this exam and it'll be great. Bye.
I love the fact that Angela and I know you're going to be surprised, maybe even disappointed.
Hi, I'm
We don't hang out.
Hi, I'm Angela, and today.
But she nailed it because she was a successful AP World student. To be a successful AP World student, the why matters. So for example, Americas before the conquest of the Americas, change, and then why change. It's very similar to why effects. So now you're realizing the historical thinking skills are not irrationally different from each other. They're just using different language to express themselves. We have one more historical thinking skill or historical reasoning skill, and that is comparison. This is everybody's favorite because I think you've been doing this the most in your life. So imagine there's a cause of something, and in that cause, there's a similarity in how they are affected, and there's a difference in how they are affected. Let's learn a little bit more about comparison from, once again, Adeline.
Hi, I'm Adeline, and today we're going to be talking about comparison in an essay. Let's compare these two objects. So in your essay, when you're comparing two things, you don't want to dedicate one paragraph solely for one thing and the other solely for the other. You want to intertwine them both in both paragraphs and talk about their similarities and their differences. For example, if you're writing about this water bottle and this lunchbox in your essay, you don't want to talk entirely in one paragraph about all of the aspects of the water bottle and then in the other one. So you don't want to have to make the reader make the connection for you because there's a chance that they might not make the connection at all. You want to be talking about both in both of your paragraphs. So one of yours might be talking about the similarities and differences in appearances, and the other one might be talking about the similarities and differences in functions.
You guys do the video.
So let's talk about the similarities and differences between Samantha and BJ. So while BJ and Samantha both have glasses, while BJ is pretending to type on his computer, Samantha is pretending to write on a piece of paper. Just remember to continually compare throughout your essay, and you're going to ace it.
Yeah. That's what we do at my school when no one wants to do any more work, it looks like. Oh no, stop.
Hi, I'm
Thank you very much, Adeline. That time Adeline and I had a really great conversation because I've actually thrown away essays where a kid just talks at length about one thing and then the next one talks at length about something else, but does no comparison. They assume the reader is going to do the comparison for them. And I think that's how you guys wrote in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. But now it's time to step up and do it. So how about the conquest of the Americas? Similarly, Mexico and Cuba, they develop syncretic beliefs. Lady of Guadalupe, for example. The difference is more natives in Latin America converted than North America. Obviously, I don't elaborate on those, but that could be the difference. So this is taking conquest of the Americas and looking at similarities and differences. It's all about how you want to address the prompt. Here are some final LEQ prompt tips. Pay attention to time period and region. I've had students come back after the test and say to me, I wrote the whole LEQ about the wrong time period. We smile because there's nothing you can do. Evidence equals key terms. Trade is not a key term. Increase in trade is leaning more to a key term because it's something more evidence and it's more something proves something versus a blasé statement. Be as specific as possible. Use a fact as evidence. Once a fact is used, though, as evidence, it is dead. You can't keep restating that George Washington was 6'2". Explain everything as if you were teaching a younger sibling. So assume, like Ace, that you need to elaborate. Don't just name drop. Elaborate on evidence you just gave and explain how it answers the prompt. All right, we're going to take only maybe 15 minutes on this. We're going to do some stimulus-based multiple choice, and then we're going to break out to some Q&A led by some of the students who are on the call right now. So let's remind ourselves that the DBQ and the LEQ are similar. But let's also understand that the stimulus-based multiple choice is also similar. It's going to have historical thinking skills like change. It's going to have spiced tea themes like social. It's going to give you a time period. So stop looking at everything in the writing section is for writing and not acknowledging that those same approaches are used when writing multiple choice questions. And yes, everybody, I have written multiple choice questions for College Board. I can't give you those questions, but I've written them. I don't know if they've ever made it to a test, though. I'll never know. So here are some tips. Read the source information first, like the date, the author. Pay attention to the period, the region, the theme. Read the questions before the passage. As you read the passage, look for keywords and phrases, but no matter what, only read the passage looking for the answers. Now I'm gonna get loud. I didn't have my extra cup of coffee, by the way, or my Swiss roll. I need you to understand to read the source and all of the document before you answer the questions means you didn't read with any purpose. You have to read the document with purpose, and your purpose is to answer questions 1, 2, and 3. You have to read questions 1, 2, and 3 first. Then you need to use process of elimination out of A, B, C, and D. Typically, if the question asks for political, there's going to be one answer that's like economic. So cross it off. There's going to be one that is cultural, like religion. Cross it off. Look for the spice tea and then look for it in A, B, C, and D. I guarantee you can eliminate. And yes, I know you can't all cross off. It's just a mental thing. Watch for absolutes like the words like always. And how's this? Look for answers that are factually correct that you already knew. My students just did this. And after they did 4 questions, I said, which ones did you already just know? And 3 of them, they just knew. They didn't have to actually read the document. By looking at the question and the time period and the theme, they already knew it. The source was stimulus, getting you engaged. It didn't necessarily mean you had to memorize it. All right. So we have copied and pasted practice questions from College Board that are in the course and exam description, meaning these are online on a PDF you all can download. I'm about to drop this in the chat. I think I have made it copyable. So you will be able to look at your own copy. So it's going to force copy the actual questions. That's towards the end of the CED, the questions. Let me know if that link worked or if I did some. Hey, Cam, thanks. All right, here we go. This is questions 1, 2, and 3. Go ahead, read the source. That is King Bela IV of Hungary writing a letter to Pope Innocent IV, let's just say of Europe, around 1250. Now that we've read the source, please go and read questions 1, 2, and 3 and give them an answer. Don't forget to do number 2 and 3. I'd really encourage you guys to stay away from the chat. Try to answer these all by yourselves. These are as College Board as they get. They were made by College Board. Thank you, Katie. We do have a key. All right, so I don't want to distract you, but we have now given you in the slideshow, we have given you questions 1 through 15. On the last slide that will become available is the answer key. And in the chat, we gave just the questions that are a larger version. Like they look bigger for you on a Google Doc. I would encourage you to take some time, maybe tonight or tomorrow, and do these a little bit more in detail. But out of the interest of time, and as I have a group of experts here, I want to leave stimulus-based multiple choice, and we could talk about it maybe tomorrow at the beginning of our cram. And I want to turn it over to our the student presenters. All right, so a reminder, finish these questions, look over the answer key. Let's just do a little math. I'm going to get my calculator on the internet thingy phone. So if out of 15 questions, you get a 10 out of 15, that's a 67%, meaning you can easily get 5 wrong and still have a 4. This is good stuff. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to invite the students to come on camera. And what they're going to do is kind of like break down some of their thoughts. This is when Amy and I are going to monitor the chat and see what type of questions you might have in the chat. And of course, the kids could also join the chat and address some things. So I'm trying to see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 promises here. Right. I'm going to step up and let them come on down. There we are.
Hi. All right, let's give a second for all of our student hosts to come on down. Hey guys. Alrighty, let's take a peek at the chat. So, to start off, Tilly asked, can you explain the difference between using evidence to address and answer the prompt? So, my take on this is that answering the prompt is like taking the prompt and like having what you want to directly respond to it with, and addressing it is more of like the restating it and like making sure you get it in. Does anyone have like anything that they want to add to that?
I think you said what you need to say.
Okay, cool.
Okay, one question that we're getting a lot is like, what are some big things to address with writing? And a lot of things that we're seeing is like, we really want like more specificity, especially in like thesis claims and things like that. And what are some other things, guys?
Definitely specificity and like name dropping too. Like that was a big thing.
Yeah,
Anyway.
especially like on LEQs, like the biggest ways to wrap up points is to write proper nouns. Like think of whatever type of name, whatever, and make sure to incorporate it, because oftentimes most people don't get to the LEQ. That's why the national average for LEQs are pretty like low. It's not because people like don't know what to do or like it's difficult, it's because they don't have enough time. So when that happens, your biggest like motive should be like ensuring that you have as much points as you can get. And that's typically by you guys just dropping as much names or proper nouns or like specific events that correlate to the prompt. Does anybody else have anything else?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, and remember, like, your quality of writing is not what's being assessed here. So as long as you're collecting those points, you guys should be good.
Yeah, that's like what I've seen like a lot of people ask questions about is all like when you think about historical thinking skills, you're like, oh, can we still use the exact same one over and over again? Or when we go over to hips, you guys ask like, can we repeat the type of hips? And like, go for it. This is not a Lang AP exam. This isn't a writing exam. This is a history exam. So if you feel more confident in purpose ones, keep writing the purpose ones over and over and over again. The AP readers don't care. You just need to get the point, and that's all that matters.
That is so true. You can use the same hip letter over and over again. Just one thing is make sure, so even though you can use the same hip letter, don't use the same like specific example. Like if you're talking about like Kublai Khan, like one specific ruling he did once, maybe I try and like use a different ruling for the next one. Yeah. All right, let's head to the next question. So I see someone asking, okay, this is a good question. How would you start an LEQ if you don't have the time or knowledge to answer it? So I guess for me, I would start with like a brain dump, like just anything that you can think of that would relate, like dump it down, write it down, make little notes to yourself. And then just start writing. And if a few things aren't accurate, like as long as your whole like main overall argument makes sense, like you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be good, right? Does anyone have anything to add on to that?
One thing I would recommend is typically go for contextualization. It's one of the easiest points there because you don't really have to know what the prompt is talking about. You just need to know what's going on around the prompt's time period. And so it's an easy point. And at least 1 point is like better than like no point, right?
Yeah. At the same time, like thesis is super easy to grab. So just create an argument. It doesn't even have to be super like well thought out. As long as you can back it with some sort of evidence, you've got the point.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yes, vocab and key terms are very big, Camilla. Just like in terms of like in your writing, that's the easiest thing to kind of just drop.
Definitely. You guys can just go to Quizlet and search like AP World History exam terms and like take a bunch of quizzes on that. Like the match is super fun. There you go.
Do you guys want to like go through like each type of writing or like each section type of section in exam and state our own like opinions or like tips for each part?
Sure.
That's a great idea.
Okay. I guess we could start with MCQs.
Yeah. Do you want to start us? Do you want to start us off?
Oh, okay. I feel like the biggest tip for MCQs is if you're a person like me, typically reading the documents sometimes confuse me because like, you know, there's like the old time language and everything. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So if you're that type of person, what I recommend is trying to go through the questions first and seeing if there's any type of question that you can understand directly. So like say if one of the sources or documents is the Communist Manifesto, you don't have to really go through the what the source is saying because you already know what the Communist Manifesto already is. So you could go through the questions and try to see which ones you can already understand and have an answer to, and then go back and read the source to check your answer technically.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then I'll give a tip. So let's say you aren't familiar with the source. You can look at the question first, see like what it's asking, and then when you go back into the source, look at it with like a critical eye. Like you don't have to stress out if you can't understand every word. Just kind of grasp the meaning, circle things that relate, underline, and just kind of like make sure that you're relating it to the question rather than getting the full meaning. All right.
Well, do you want to move on to one of the writing ones?
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, there's one more thing I want to say. This exam is very dependent on timing. And I know it feels like really scary for a lot of people, but the first thing that for MCQs, try not to take more than a minute per question. Like if you feel yourself taking more than a minute or even like 45 seconds more, just pick a random letter of the day and move on. Like it's perfectly fine and you're probably going to get more points doing that than if you took your time to try to figure out the answer by like spending more than a few minutes on it.
That's so true. Or as one of my like favorite teachers used to say, star and skip. Like you can come back to a question.
Mm-hmm. The only problem with that one is that you might run out of time, and that means you might have like too many like star, and you just don't have an answer for that.
Good point. You can do a temporary answer and still star it and come back, but have it answered. That's a good point. All right. You guys want us to go over SAQ tips, or did anyone have final thoughts on MCQs?
Oh, there's one question. It says, Ethan says, what do you do if you don't know at all and the stimulus doesn't help?
Flip a coin. It's always better to give some answer than no answer at all, honestly. And especially like sometimes you can find like clues to some other questions in like other questions sources, if that makes sense. So just try and keep those like in mind.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, Dr. Posa, process of elimination, huge.
Yeah. And what you need to know is that like the MCQs are largely chronological order. So if you feel a lot more confident on like the later units, I don't do this, but I know some people do and it works for them, but you could skip like a little bit later to the passages or stimuluses if you feel more confident in those answers and work backwards so that you don't spend so much time.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys want to go to, did you guys say SAQs?
Yeah, someone said SAQs.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay, so I saw a student was asking, this is off, well, it's not off topic, but it's on the writing. They're asking if we use HIP. Does anyone want to like talk about that? I mean, once we get to the DBQs, just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Got you.
Cool.
Yeah, the
Okay.
MCQs are chronological order. Deb, do you want to start us off with SAQs?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, the first thing to know about SAQs is that, like we said, there are the 3 different types. So there's the type with a primary source, a secondary source, and then no source, or you get to choose. So my first tip is like the one that you get to choose, like scribble down a few thoughts about each and then see what you're more comfortable with. Because the main thing is like making sure that you're comfortable. Then the next 2 with the sourcing, right? You should go in and like read both of the sources and like know what you're gonna answer. The next thing, oh, my computer blocked out. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so the next thing is to make sure like you're not worrying about the length so much as the quality. Quality over quantity any day. And like the formatting matters, but it's mostly just the quality that matters. So write something that you're proud of, write something that you feel good about, and that's what comes first.
Yeah, like I see a lot of people saying like write like 5 sentences for the SAQs. It really doesn't matter, and this is something that Mr. Jambi was talking about. As long as you're answering the question, just answer it, give your reasoning, call it a day, move on to the next one. The SAQs are fast. If you break it down to each like sub point, it's something like 3 or 4 minutes per question, I think. So really just make sure you're maximizing your time. The AP exam time is a huge thing. I know plenty of people that definitely could write a phenomenal LEQ, but they're just not fast writers. And if that's something you know about yourself, you have to learn how to kind of just dump and reason through. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful essay I've ever written. It just has to hit the points.
Also, I feel like this could relieve a lot of y'all's stress, but know like you have 3 SAQs, but the last question you get to choose between number 3 or 4. Those questions are usually like differing in time periods, like a lot. There's going to be like a lot of gap between the time periods. So even if you don't feel very confident about like say like period number 2, most likely the other question is going to be around period number 5 or 6. I mean, you can't fully depend on that, but that's what I've mostly seen throughout most of these SAQ options. So you don't have to be too stressed about what type of SAQ it is. And additionally, most of the SAQs are, well, at least the last questions are typically broad, like they're given more broadly. So you have probably, if you listen to your classes, if you've attended these camp sessions, listen to Heimler, you most likely than not already have at least some type of understanding on it, and you can BS your way through it.
Yeah. Oh, someone said on the
Like
no
this
source writing one.
Yeah, I saw this question and I've answered it on the chat before, but just for anyone that's wondering this too, like I would say just if you don't know, like if you can't answer off the top of your head, like for the SAQ, just try to write something down that you think is remotely correct, because most often than not, like you don't know what can get you points. So I think it's writing something is better than just leaving it blank. So just try to do your best, and just, I guess a brain dump would be better than not writing anything.
Oh, also I'm seeing a lot of just like distress in this chat. If it makes y'all feel any better, I have never gotten a 5 on an exam, and I have gotten like awards for my writing. I promise you it's really not a big deal. And like you guys are going to be fine. At the end of the day, this is just a test, and it doesn't factor into like the actual like grade that you get in the class.
Yeah, honestly,
Yeah,
don't stress. It's
definitely.
AP World. If you don't do well on it, like, what's the worst that's gonna happen? You have to take a world history class in college. It's
Yeah,
not that
please
bad.
just take a deep breath, guys.
I promise, like, you're gonna be fine. Most colleges even accept like 3 4s, 5s. Like, don't stress. And if you get a 1 or 2, like, then you get a 1 or 2. Like, there's worse things. It's okay. You're
And
amazing.
also,
Even just being in this class is like that's an accomplishment. Like, you made it to AP level. Like, whoa.
like,
Dr.
I've
Posey
seen
said
a
BJ
lot
was
of y'all's responses. Like, I've seen a lot of y'all responses throughout the nights, and I'm just gonna say, you guys don't give yourselves enough credit as you deserve. Like, I'm reading y'all's, and I'm like, damn, y'all are gonna pass. I know you will.
Yeah,
Don't
to be
worry.
totally honest, I would not have done this probably when I was taking AP World as a freshman. So props to y'all, because this is 15 hours. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Something that I did want to add was like my teacher, my AP teacher, she stresses this a lot for AP World students. Like, you're scoring points off a rubric, so don't like stress out. This is not, like we've said before, this is not an English class, so they're not judging you based on like grammatical errors or like the quality of your writing. It's just making sure that you know the historical context that you're writing, and you can make a point and defend what the point you're making. So don't like stress too much about it. Y'all are gonna do great.
Okay.
Do
I
we
guess
want
going
to do
back to the topic.
DBQ, LEQ tips?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's maybe start with DBQ. I feel like I've seen more questions about that.
Okay.
Okay. So DBQ, do we want to like start by going over like the rubric, and then we can all like go like over 1 point, like we can divide
Yeah,
it?
somebody says they want to see the rubric. We could
Okay.
go over here.
Actually, I have a review book in my room that shows everything. Hold on.
So basically, a rough outline of how the DBQ is graded is first you're going to have 1 point for your contextualization, then you're going to have a point for your thesis, and then the third point you're going to have over if you actually refer to at least 6, if you source 6 documents, bare minimum, and then provide support and describe those, and then get at least 3 hip statements with an EBD, and then lastly is the complexity. So that makes a total of 7.
Yeah,
That's
the
the whole.
biggest like thing that I find the most helpful is to kind of like your first paragraph, that's just like contextualize it, write your thesis, done. And then as for just mainly like your body paragraphs, you're going to want to group your documents. I personally like to try to use all 7 just in case one of mine falls through. I still have all 6, like I still have 6 to get the point. And then group in some sort of your evidence beyond the documents, like your outside evidence, in when one of those groups, wherever it's kind of applicable. There's normally going to be one paragraph that kind of has less like substantiary evidence, and I kind of like to add it there. And then at the end, like the conclusion, if you choose to write a conclusion, you don't have to, but it does give you another shot at that thesis point if you miss it in your introduction. Complexity, we've talked about this, unicorn point. If you can get it, if you've been consistently like pulling 6 out of 7s on your DBQs that like the whole year, go for it, try. But otherwise, wouldn't even think about it too hard.
Ali, you asked about like what your thesis should involve if it says like to what the extent is. Just rewrite that whole thing. If you feel confused with how it's being said, just think of it as saying how much. To what extent is the exact same thing as how much. How much did something change? How much did something impact something? That's basically what it is. They just love to make it sound very confusing, but don't be scared. Like College Board just wants y'all to cry. Don't let them let you cry.
Real.
Mhm.
For contextualization, one tip that my teacher taught me back when I was in World is to think of it like, the Star Wars opening from like back then, like the old Star Wars show. You know how they give you like a little preview of what's going on in the timeline and like they continue through on what happened in the previous episode? That's basically your contextualization. You make a story in order to place your prompt into context, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So like another thing, if you guys haven't seen Star Wars, that I've seen a lot of examples of is like in a TV show, how like they have the on this episode, or like on last episode, but it doesn't always have to be the last episode. It's just things that are relevant. So pull in what's relevant to what you're gonna write about. Make sure you're relating to the prompt. That's like the main thing, is like your argument and the prompt. Remember also, this was like with the DBQ yesterday. I saw a lot of people with their thesis statements, not fully like showing which side that they were on. Like it is so important to say ultimately and like support your side. Like it's an argument essay overall. And then the documents are like backing you up. Another thing is like going into it, you might be like, okay, yeah, I know, like I like this side better. But then you're gonna read through and find that the documents are all supporting one side over the other. Like you can change your side. Like it doesn't have to be what you personally agree with. It has to be what you can support with evidence.
Yeah. Oh, I'm seeing like a clarifying question about LEQs and DBQs, but on the DBQ, you're given 6 documents or 7 documents to look at as well as a prompt. And with the LEQs, you're just given the prompt.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're both long essay like format. So yeah.
Also, for the DBQ, you get 60 minutes and 15 of those are only for like looking at your prompts. Like you get ample time to like take them and like do what you need to do and like organize yourself. Organization is really, really important.
For the people that are asking about complexity, complexity is not something you can get on just saying like one sentence. It's something that you have to integrate throughout your whole essay. That's what makes it so complicated. And so there isn't like a set rubric on how to get complexity, but if you're trying to aim for it, think about like making connections past the periods. So like you might talk, if you're talking about, if the prompt is about like globalization or urbanization, trying to bring up topics from like the present day economy to like comparing the present day economy to back then or what the period is, and making sure to integrate that throughout your whole essay. That's like one way. You just need to find nuance and complexity. Yeah, you need to provide nuance throughout
Or
your
also
whole
to
essay.
kind of argue like the opposing point to your thesis and kind of prove why that is incorrect more like from your stance, like more directly. But yeah.
But honestly, y'all, it's not worth it. You'll probably get a 5 without complexity anyways. What's another one? What's another question?
Oh, I keep seeing the question like, do we get a rubric? Unfortunately, you don't get to look at the rubric while you're taking the test, but like you kind of can just remember like beforehand, like thesis, context, 1 paragraph, because you'd write that anyway, right? Like you're fine, you're gonna get that. And then evidence is just the docs, which like it's on the paper. It says like use all docs, write a thesis, something. Like you'll be okay. Just it gives you like a mini checklist that isn't the rubric, but just like you can use that and just do what you would normally do, and you'll probably fit the rubric anyway.
Yeah, drop more questions in the Q&A, guys, and upvote ones that you also want answered so we can see them.
Yeah.
Also, one recommendation is literally utilize that 15-minute reading period. It is a blessing in disguise. What I typically do during this is I go through the documents and annotate it. What I mean by that is like, if you go throughout the documents, I usually have like a column system. One column is going to be my hit point, and then the other column is going to be like 1 or 2 words over what the document is talking about. And then I do that for every single one of the 7, and then find groupings, y'all. Groupings are very important because that is what your thesis is basically going to be. Anything else have?
To answer this question, no. Again, like the quality of your writing in that sort of like literary sense is not what's being graded here. So don't stress.
Random comment. Just want to point out that there's a survey on the bottom of the screen now, and There's also probably going to be one in your email when you leave. Feel free to fill this out, give us feedback. We super duper appreciate it.
Yes, they do tell you when the 15 minutes are up and when you should start. And you should also have a clock inside your testing room. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. You should also have that so you can time yourself. HIP is basically one of the like requirements to get a point, and that's when you write historical context, intended audience, point of view, or purpose for at least 4 documents, at least 3.
Yeah. Sophia,
and you can write before the 15 minutes are up. No, continue. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, you can write whenever you feel ready.
I'm going to jump on in and wrap things up. I want to give a applause to our team. Do understand that there was no AP World when I was a Ute, so I was not able to take AP World. I'm going to come in and just kind of clean up, not a couple things they said wrong, just a couple things that were brought up that I just felt that I want to add my insight. So thank you very much, girls. We're going to see you tomorrow night where we're going to need your help again. I don't know what you heard, Dr. Posa, but one thing that I wanted to kind of chit chat about was, what do you do when you don't know anything? And we've all been there, okay? Answering a question during an interview, right? I mean, just what do you know? What do you do when you don't know anything? When you're writing a answer, go to the prompt, like you said earlier, steal it, and then write some historical knowledge next to it. Somebody said just write something you know about. But if you just write something you know about, Genghis Khan, he was a Mongol. If you would have just added the prompt stem to Genghis Khan, he was a Mongol, maybe that would have worked. So use the prompt to be your friend. That's for SAQs 1, 2, 3, and 4, and for your LEQ and DBQ. So just use the prompt over and over, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And for the multiple choice. For the multiple choice, I do not encourage skipping ever. I don't, because you don't have enough time to come back and reread the question, the stimulus all over again. So I would read it as well as I can. You have things in your brain, synapses and dendrites. Chances are, if you read the question well, like you actually read the question correctly, your first answer will be your personal best answer. You're not going to be able to have time to find the right neuron pathway of retrieval. So just move forward. That doesn't mean you can't mark it on your page to come back and look at it. Some of my kids finish with 10 minutes left, but I would say most kids finish with less than 5 minutes left for the multiple choice. I'm going to give Amy just a second. Maybe she heard something the kids were talking about she wanted to address.
Yeah, no, I think they did a great job. And I was thinking about how for process of elimination, a lot of times the answer choices, there will be one outside the time period. There will be one that's off theme. The more you know, the more you're able to eliminate things, so that even if you don't understand the prompt, even if you don't understand, it's kind of like a matching exercise. Does this theme match with the passage? Does this time period match with the passage? So you can use what you do know to eliminate answer choices and just give yourself a better shot. These are just like test taking skills that you can rely on even when you don't know something.
Awesome.
Process of elimination.
We had a wonderful evening. We're trying to keep each night a little bit different. At least I think we're trying to do that. Hopefully you're seeing that. So for tonight, we tried to show and give you time to practice, bring the kids in, have some videos. Don't forget, before you sign off, number 1, there is a night 4 survey at the bottom of your screen. They, 5 will really need that feedback to be the best cram team this year and next. Don't forget, like I share on the screen, that you can win $100 by sharing your cram experience. Use @5ablecrams and tag a @thinkfiveable in the post or caption. Blow Fiveable up, blow the crams up, and you may be rewarded. Coming up tomorrow, we call it the grand finale. We will be bringing in content review, rubric review, last hints. We'll talk about those stimulus-based multiple choice questions we want to do for homework, right? So don't forget to do that. Remember to follow @thinkfiveable on your social media networks. And that screen is my favorite screen. You think the kids did a good job tonight, Amy?
Yes, I think you guys did amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience to our student host. That's really awesome that they, shared their time with us tonight. And the students in the chat, you guys did a great job with your thesis statements and your all of the practice. So we really appreciate it. And we have some fun stuff planned for tomorrow night. So come back tomorrow night. We have some interesting games to play for world history to get you ready.
Please do. We will see you all tomorrow night. Have a good night.
All right. Bye.